From ghostly sightings, weird time slips, and bizarre reality glitches, Liverpool, it seems, has something of an obscure history of strange occurrences. But an incident in 1961, which saw multiple witnesses incapacitated by strange figures, would add the possibility of interdimensional gateways to the city's ever-growing list of unusual happenings. Join us as we explore the Wavertree Bus Incident. The last shift of the evening, which left the city centre immediately after midnight, was traditionally the worst for the drivers of the number 79 bus route. It was too early for the many workers finishing their twilight shifts to make use of, yet too late for anyone else needing to wake up early for work the next morning. As a result, the majority of those staggering onto the bus in the city's main station were drunk, or under the subdued effects of something far more addictive and dangerous. Those few passengers who were not incapacitated tended to keep their heads down, avoiding eye contact, as the revelers and partygoers gradually thinned out along the route. This evening had been no exception, and with only 10 minutes to go before their arrival at the final stop, there were now only a few sporadic passengers remaining on the vehicle. All were situated downstairs on the bus's lower deck, with the exception of one young woman who was seated on her own on the upper level. It was just at the point when the driver was beginning to ease up and thank God for a rare uneventful journey that a piercing scream echoed down the stairway behind him. This sudden and unexpected commotion forced him to apply the brakes and pull over to one side of the road, before looking into the periscope at the side of his steering wheel to see what was going on. As he did so, he caught sight of the disturbing image of the girl seated high above him, writhing and twisting, as if she was suffering the effects of a seizure or other medical incident. Gesturing to the rest of his passengers to remain seated, the driver hurriedly made his way up the stairs and attempted to calm the girl as he walked past the rows of empty seats towards her, noting that she appeared to be completely awake and in control of her actions. But at the same time, she seemed to be struggling in a violent manner, trying to rise from her seated position, almost as if she was caught fast upon something. Leaning across the writhing and screaming figure and trying to assist her in freeing herself, the driver suddenly recoiled in shock and horror, falling hard against the seats nearby. He watched in utter disbelief as the badly burned and twisted human hand which was holding onto the girl's arm ever so slowly released its grip, remaining perfectly still for a moment, almost as if it was some sentient creature. In an instant, it retreated directly through the cushioning of the rear section of the seat where the girl was sitting, leaving absolutely no trace of its presence. The girl tumbled into the driver's arms, with a series of dark red marks appearing on her skin where the charred and gnarled appendage had been holding on to her. A faint whiff of acrid smoke hung in the air, this having been the only trace of the horrifying encounter which both of the traumatized witnesses had just experienced.
Just quickly, I'd like to share with you an unsettling experience of my own, albeit of a different nature. You see this guy standing on top of a hill looking out into the distance? Well, that's me. And up until a couple of years ago, I couldn't do that. As odd as it sounds, I was terrified of open spaces. When I was 11 years old, I had a massive anxiety attack, and my brain basically began to associate those feelings of panic with the situation I was in at the time. I was playing football on a wide open field at school, and from that point onwards, whenever I was in a wide open space, those feelings of anxiety would return, to the point where I'd actively avoid putting myself in those situations. And from there I developed this debilitating phobia. If you face similar challenges, here's what I did and what I recommend you do. Talk to a professional. I've been going to a hypnotherapist who has helped me to understand the processes going on in my brain and how to develop coping mechanisms which stop the anxiety in its tracks. Together, we're working on ways of rewiring the way my brain initiates the fight or flight response, and in this way I've been able to disassociate the feelings of panic with open spaces, as they were never the cause of the anxiety in the first place. This episode is in paid partnership with BetterHelp, and there is no easier way of talking to a credentialed therapist than through BetterHelp. Whilst I use a hypnotherapist, I'm also interested in talking to a traditional therapist as well, just as a more immediate point of contact. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you all from the comfort of your own home. Go to betterhelp.com/bedtime stories, simply answer their questionnaire, and you could be talking to a credentialed therapist in 48 hours in most cases. And if you use my link or choose bedtime stories during sign up, you can enjoy a special discount on your first month of therapy.
Located on Britain's northwestern coastline, facing outward towards the Irish Sea, Liverpool is one of the United Kingdom's oldest and largest settlements. It is therefore perhaps unsurprising that this vast community possesses an abundance of famous hauntings and supernatural encounters. From the phantom page boy who walks the corridors of the Adelphi Hotel to the ghostly priest of Speke Hall, there is no shortage of unearthly residents. But Liverpool also plays host to a somewhat curious phenomenon, which is to be found within its wider paranormal catalogue of time slips and strange reality glitches. A significant number of inexplicable incidents have been reported, all of which relate directly to the city's transportation network. These involve modern-day vehicles and travel routes, which could not possibly have any association with events from the past. Yet somehow they continue to play host to mysterious encounters with entities which seem to defy any kind of rational explanation. Beings and characters that appear alongside unassuming residents who are attempting to travel across the city. More often than not, these apparitions choose to interact directly with their fellow passengers, often causing deep distress as a result of their actions. Amongst these strange entities is a young girl with shoulder-length blonde hair who wears traditional Victorian dress and appears in front of numerous passengers along the city's number 10 bus route. Mischievous in nature, she has been known to play tricks on others, delighting in poking sleeping passengers in the face with her finger in order to wake them up. On each and every occasion, she will then disappear right before the witness, leaving no physical trace that she had ever been present. There are also multiple reports of faceless spirits riding the number 79, which have run away or disappeared when they've been challenged. These apparitions present as having no recognizable features whatsoever, instead possessing perfectly smooth facial areas. They appear isolated, well away from other passengers, and make no sound whatsoever when they are subsequently interacted with. Several of these anonymous figures have been documented by members of the city's police force, which has been called to a number of incidents by terrified bus drivers. When the police then approach these apparitions, they run off on foot and then disappear from sight, despite there having been no physical way for them to have escaped. But perhaps the most unnerving incident to have ever taken place on the number 79 is reported to have occurred one afternoon during January of 1961. An episode which deeply affected multiple witnesses and was so utterly traumatizing in nature that it firmly cemented itself within the city's already extensive supernatural lore. The day in question carried with it a biting chill in the air, despite the fact the skies were clear with a beaming sun. Just after 12 p.m, the bus was making its way along Wavertree High Street, bringing passengers out of the city centre. The driver that afternoon was a man by the name of Douglas Johnson, who was not a regular driver along that particular route. Instead, he had been called in by his employers at short notice due to several of the other drivers all suffering from a stomach illness which had been making the rounds. The bus at that time was carrying a relatively high number of passengers who were spread somewhat evenly across both decks of the vehicle. It had started out like any other afternoon service until Douglas happened across an unexpected diversion along the route. Sitting in the middle of the road, just outside the thatched house pub, was a metal sign that was ordering him to turn onto Prince Alfred Road. Indicating to turn right, Douglas had started to make the manoeuvre and then called out to inform the passengers of this development. This, of course, resulted in a chorus of groans and protests due to the additional time which would likely be added onto the journey. He had not travelled far along Prince Alfred Road when the engine had unexpectedly cut out, giving no prior warning or indication that it was going to do so. This mechanical failure left the vehicle completely stranded at the junction with Hunter's Lane. With the passengers growing restless behind him, Douglas was trying to restart the engine when he suddenly became aware of a figure standing immediately outside the doors. Pausing his efforts and looking across at this odd-looking form, the driver was bewildered to see that they were wearing a dark-coloured hooded cloak with a black mask covering their face. More worrying still, 8 more figures dressed in an identical manner were all now standing at various other points around the exterior of the bus, effectively surrounding it. In a heartbeat, the figure which had been stood outside the doors was suddenly standing right next to Douglas, having somehow entered the vehicle despite the doors having remained closed. As Douglas rose to his feet to object to this intrusion, the hooded figure had commanded him to sit back down, waving his hand in a dismissive manner. The driver discovered that he could do nothing but obey the order, as if under some kind of spell, before then going on to lose consciousness. As the conductor and passengers began to protest and shout about what was taking place, more of the figures now mysteriously materialized amongst their number. They either gestured or verbally commanded the rest of the passengers to cease their complaints, seeming to send each one of them into a sleep or trance-like state as they moved through the bus. At this point, a 16-year-old girl who had slipped down behind one of the seats to avoid detection suddenly darted out from her hiding place and managed to escape through the middle doorway. Running as fast as she could along Church Road North and away from the vehicle, she had turned to find 2 of the cloaked figures desperately chasing after her. In the distance ahead, the girl had caught sight of a lone police officer walking in the same direction she was running, apparently walking his daily beat. Screaming for his attention, she had run up to the constable and pleaded with him to help her and the other passengers, indicating the direction of the incident. The 2 cloaked figures who had been running after her had now disappeared, and when she and the police officer had reached the road on which the stricken vehicle was situated, so too had the others who had been surrounding it. Clearly persuaded by her impassioned and agitated state, the officer had told the girl to go into a nearby shop and to phone his local station to report the matter. He then set off on foot down the road towards the bus, where he found the driver and all the passengers still sitting in an apparent trance-like state. One at a time, and with a significant effort, the officer was gradually able to bring each of the vehicle's occupants back to a state of awareness, noting that every one of them took several minutes to recall what had taken place, apparently suffering from some form of memory loss. After a time, they became highly emotional or agitated as they remembered the haunting robed figures who had incapacitated them. The engine started up at the first time of asking, once the driver had recovered sufficiently from his ordeal to be able to continue on his journey. When the officer asked him why he had driven the bus onto this particular stretch of road, as it was not a standard bus route, Douglas told him about the diversion at the Thatched House pub. However, on further investigation, no such diversionary signage was found at that location. In the years since the mysterious Wavertree encounter, many local commentators have sought to try and make sense of the event's bizarre circumstances. A number of them propose that the whole affair may have been a joke or trick being played on the passengers, likely by the driver and some unknown associates of his. A prank that was hastily discontinued and then covered up when one of the passengers proved so intimidated as to go and involve the authorities. Others have argued in favour of several similar scenarios, including an impromptu performance by local actors or students. Alternatively, it might have been an attempted robbery or another criminal act, which was abandoned by the perpetrators upon realising it was doomed to fail. There are also those who have suggested that the incident may have been the result of some form of mass hallucination or hysteria, somehow brought about by the unexpected diversion from what should have been a routine journey, producing a collective paranoia about what was taking place. But there are other theories about what occurred on that strange and fateful day, which centre around the bizarre powers the cloaked figures seemed to possess. Beings which appeared capable of passing directly through the metallic exterior of the bus and incapacitating their victims with only the power of their minds. These abilities raise questions regarding their origins, such as whether they may have travelled from the past or the far future, or may not have been of this earth at all. Perhaps they were interdimensional travellers, who had somehow accessed our reality through a weakness in the fabric of space and time. Whatever the case may be, their motives for placing the driver and passengers into such a trance-like state remains a complete mystery to this day. We first heard this story on the Beyond Creepy YouTube channel, an excellent resource for finding some of the most obscure cases on record. But after some more digging, it quickly became apparent that what happened in Wavertree High Street is only one of several bizarre incidents to have taken place across the Merseyside area. It seems there have also been strange time-slip occurrences and reality glitches in other locations, most notably the village of Thingwall and the infamous Bold Street in the Ropewalks district of Liverpool. Could Merseyside be situated in an area where the boundaries between neighbouring realities or timelines are particularly weak? And what possible dangers do those unlucky enough to slip between these cracks face? Perhaps we'll find out when we explore these cases in future episodes. I'm gonna get me a burger, you punk ass, bitch ass, punk ass, bitch. I wasn't really calling you a punk ass, bitch ass, punk ass, bitch. I was merely saying it for comedic effect. Yes. Yes, that's what I was doing. So you can fuck off now. Bye-bye.
Bedtime.